Hello and welcome back to Let's Talk More on Monday. I am your podcast host, Chloe. Founder Ariana has taken over for a couple of our first interviews in 2024, but I am back on the mic and I am joined by a couple of wonderful women, and we are going to talk a little bit about dating apps and how that has affected the culture of dating and specifically how it can affect our mental health. So I am joined today by Marie and Vikki. I would love for you guys to introduce yourselves. Marie, obviously you are a familiar face on the podcast, but Vikki, you are a new one. So we love having some old and new friends here today. Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you. Very nice to meet you, Vikki. My name's Marie. I'm a previous contributor of More Magazine. I was also the former director of social media as well. But now I'm just here to support More Magazine in any way I can.
Love it. Yeah, and I'm Vikki. I'm a therapist. I specialize in relationship therapy, sex therapy, and I also work with trauma too.
Perfect. So you definitely know a lot about what we're going to be talking about today, because relationships can definitely affect our mental health in ways that we may not even see coming sometimes. So let's get into it a little bit. Dating culture is definitely interesting and it's shifting all the time, but I would say in the past 5 years, it's really especially been changed by these apps. We've always had eHarmony, but it wasn't as accessible as like downloading Tinder onto your phone is.
Mm-hmm.
So there's like this whole generation of people that are now meeting on apps. And, I don't know the statistics of it, but some of them are, a one and done. Some of them are maybe a brief relationship. Some of them turn into lifelong relationships and marriages. So it's definitely interesting to see how that goes. And I've even seen, maps on Reddit of someone who's like, I've matched with, 120 people. I went on dates with 60 of them. I went on a second date with 35, like breaking it down by the numbers, because sometimes that's how it can feel, is a statistics game on these apps. So let's get into it a little bit. Marie, how do you think that the dating culture has shifted since we've kind of introduced this system?
So for me, my dating life didn't really start until I got into college. And so I didn't really know exactly what that looked like for me. I came from a smaller town and then I moved to Indianapolis. So it's slightly bigger. So I wasn't really sure what was to come my way. I had friends that were in previous relationships in high school, and obviously they just met through like having the same classes. So that's kind of where I thought it would start. But then the buzz around Tinder came about, and I, decided, I was like, let me download it, let me try and see. Definitely for me, I guess my thoughts ahead of it before I downloaded it, I kind of thought it was going to be this, oh, I'm going to find the love of my life here. It's going to be great. I'm going to find the perfect match. Sounds like that's what this app is designed for. And I kind of then found out after being on it for quite some time, the energy that I was seeing between like the people I was talking to is very much just like a hookup kind of thing. And like I said, I didn't really know what dating looked like. So I thought like, this is just kind of what it is. Like, this is just like how, you're supposed to find your match and things like that. And I did end up with someone for a longer term in a relationship. We're no longer together. I think we were together for like less than a year. But then after that, I think the app just got even worse and worse. So that's kind of what I designated that app for. And then I started finding out more about those, the other popular apps like Bumble and Hinge. Bumble was okay. I just feel like me as an introvert. So since you women are the first ones that, have to message, I am like too shy to do that. And so that's kind of why I ended up veering away from that one.
Yeah.
I liked Hinge. I like their mission. It's like their app is designed to be deleted. And so I kind of felt, had a little more hope with that one. Still use that one today. I'm just not very active on it. I just pop in there every so often, but it's kind of like the same. It's kind of more of like a 50-50. I can tell some people are on there, and I like the status of like that you can actually put on there, like what you're actually looking for. It's like, oh, I'm looking for long term, but I'm open to short term, or vice versa, things like that. I like just that some people are able to like, make that clear. And I like to be very clear myself on those things. So that's kind of just been my dating experience. So, I mean, I feel like I never even got to do traditional dating, if that makes sense. But that's just kind of how the apps have affected my dating scene in a sense.
Yeah. Well, you never know what's going to happen. You can still date authentically, as they say.
I know. I'm like, I sound so old. Like, I'm just like back in the day.
Well, Vikki, how long have you been a therapist?
Yeah, so I have been a therapist for about 7 or 8 years at this point.
Awesome.
Yeah, so you've probably seen a pretty major shift in the dating culture.
For sure. And I think there's even that differentiate. I think it even is a huge shift like pre and post COVID too. I think that even revolutionized kind of like the dating app world as well, because just navigating it throughout that and post that, it increased in popularity as well. And I think
you can even say if you have the vaccine on some of the dating apps. Which is wild.
So I think it has changed so much where it's like, and we're all kind of talking about it a little bit more of like, is this the mainstream now? Like, is this how we see it? Right? Like, that's kind of, I think, the major question that I see us as we like even post COVID of like, can we even like what you guys refer to like authentically date or like kind of like old school date anymore? Like, is that even possible with just kind of all these major shifts?
Yeah, I feel like the social like cues of like all those things, because that's kind of when it did get a little more popular. It's like you could on Tinder you could talk to like everyone around the world. Like you didn't have like a maximum like mileage. Like you could talk to people in totally different continents, which to me felt unrealistic. It's like, will I really travel across to like Australia to go talk to this person? It was kind of fun, but it was just, an interesting way to kind of connect people through the pandemic and whatnot. So, but yeah, I will say this, like the social aspect of like dating is definitely shifted because of COVID. I feel like not many people approach people anymore, like at, in person or things like that, at least not in my case. So it's interesting. I think it's just like people are maybe just, are more hesitant than usual. We feel a little more confident, like talking like on a screen versus like in person feels a little bit more safe in that sense. So I kind of notice like, people's energies are a little different on the phone versus like actually chatting in person.
Yeah. And meeting someone out in public, like there's almost an expectation now that when you do meet up with them, you're already going to know things about them. Like if you match on this app, they have a profile that says what they do, what their values may be, if they have pets, like you already have this framework for who they are. And if you just like meet some rando, you know literally nothing about them, like you're starting from ground zero. So there is some security in already knowing things about this person and knowing like there's a better chance as you go in that it's going to work out. Yeah. But I'm curious, Vikki, what your thoughts are on how these shifts in the way that we think about dating and even approach it, like how that is affecting our mental health and how we think about relationships in general.
For sure. Yeah, you mentioned earlier, Chloe, about just kind of like the statistics, right? And I think what's so hard is like we can make up our own statistics based on some of these apps, right? It's like, well, here we are, I've swiped on X amount of people, but I've only got this in my back, and all of it is so almost like faulty statistics we can come up with, and therefore I'm not desirable, right? Like it can be all these things we can kind of jump to. It's like, well, if I'm not getting this, what is very almost measurable feedback, what does this say about me? So I'm seeing a lot of folks internalize maybe what's happening on the apps. And it's just so easy to kind of get like lost in that, like what you said about like that numbers or statistics. Like I always am curious, like that person you said on Reddit who was like, I've went matched with X amount of people, went on this many dates. I'm like, I wonder if they changed like their view of themselves in that whole process, or just how they viewed. So that's really what I tend to see, a lot of discouragement of just kind of like, hey, like, why am I not getting this feedback kind of coming back to me, or why am I not getting that affirmation or whatever, that people are kind of into it based on, and really all we're really basing it on is maybe like a few prompts that they've filled out, one picture, and like a really brief, like I have to remind my folks a lot, like this profile is not you inherently, right? And I think that's really hard though, because it's so vulnerable to put out almost like this little snapshot of yourself.
For sure.
Yeah. But it's just a very surface level picture of who you are. Like there's no way to know someone truly from the couple of blurbs that you put onto your profile. So it's simply a framework for meeting new people, but it is very easy to be like, well, this is me. And if I don't get like, matches, I've swiped right on so many people and I don't have any matches, like that. Yeah, that could definitely be, it can be demoralizing.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that's really where I see it kind of take a toll.
Yeah. Yeah, and like all those conversations that you start and you put energy into and you try to like learn things about them, and then you come back 2 months later and realize that they fizzled. Like, why did I even put energy into this?
Right. Yeah, I think there's so much, like any kind of app, we can lose so much time in it too, and not even know it. So that's also one thing as well. And I love that there's some out there that you can just be upfront about what you're looking for, as opposed to, some folks really feel like you said, Chloe, of like, hey, like I had all these conversations, or I thought there was a connection, and then it turns out we actually want different things, or it kind of fizzled out. And it's like, it is hard to sit there and be like, that was so much time that I invested into that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's always something that you have to wonder about when you're entering into a new relationship with someone, is like, am I going to put all this time and energy into it for it just to not work out? And with apps, you're just increasing the amount that you're going to put yourself out there. So, again, back to those statistics, you're just more likely that it's not going to go well.
Yeah.
So, but also more likely for you to find out what you don't want and keep, shaving down that algorithm.
Yeah, it is kind of crazy. Like you do start, at least with Hinge, because that's the only one I actively use now. It's like, it really does start to filter out like the person's like personality, and like it's like, and they even say like, oh, this is like the person that we think you would be the most compatible with. And so it's interesting to see like what they are choosing for me based on like my interests, because it's like, oh, like we have the same interests and hobbies, we are foodies, and we both have dogs and things like that. So it's just, to me it's still like creepy, but like I get how it works. But it's also just like, why, like it's surprising that like Hinge is telling me that this is supposed to be the person I'm supposed to reach out to and all that. So it's kind of fascinating to me that there is, I'm sure there's some sort of like analysis that goes behind that, but it is kind of, I want to hear more though about that, and like how is this person selected for me? But I guess I'm technically selecting them myself, so based off of who I'm choosing to like and who I'm not. So it's an interesting aspect of it.
Right. Yeah. But it's a good thing for like folks to kind of though be reminded of like, hey, like there's going to be trial and error, with that, like as you said, of just like, hey, like as it figure out the algorithm and stuff like that, and just tries to get to that point, because it can feel there, but it's so vulnerable, right? Like all that trial and error is so vulnerable, it's horrible. Like we're talking to these people, putting ourselves out there, so that can be just such a strenuous kind of trial.
I feel like when I started the dating apps when I was like 19, 20, like I think anytime like a conversation just didn't end the way I wanted it to end, I think like I was like devastated. I was like, no one will love me, all of that. Like I thought it was like end of the world, but like now like I'm 26 and I take it very much with a grain of salt, especially at my age, because I do have my age demographic at like my age and like older, because like we're all like at that period of life where like we're starting like early on careers and all of that. So like I don't get offended anymore if like someone doesn't like message me back within 5 minutes. Like I am more understanding of that in a sense. Like, and it kind of gives me a a kind of like a flag in my end. Like if they want to put the time into like talking with me, they will. So that's kind of just like the energy I just end up matching at the end of the day with that conversation. So definitely I've had some growth from like where I started to like where I am now with them.
Yeah. I like what you said about matching energy, but I've also run into problems with that.
Yeah.
I genuinely don't know if it's because I am like, I consider myself to be an empathetic person and I have a background in theater, so I'm always going to yes and you. Like
Oh.
that's just my natural inclination is to like whatever you are going with, I'm like, yeah, let's do it. So then, you know, someone said like, oh, I match their energy so well, but you know, is that us connecting or is that me mirroring the energy
Yeah.
you brought me so that this goes well? I
Right.
don't know.
I
Yeah.
even wonder, kind of like the same essence. It's like it can bring out the people pleaser in people, like jumping
Yeah.
on the apps of just like, why aren't they messaging me back? Right? Like, do I need to like
Yeah.
change myself? Do I need to match their energy? Is this authentically me that's showing up? Like, and like the revisionist history of like, oh my gosh, like you said, Marie, of like early on, and like you're like, oh, why did I say that, or why did I do that? You know, we can pick ourselves apart with it all so much, because a lot of it is either like in conversations, or then it's kind of when we meet up.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I think it also like has like that barrier too, because it's like I feel like some people on text are very short, and like to me sometimes that comes off as like rude, or like they don't really care, where like I'm sending like paragraph after paragraph, and then then you meet in person and they do have great conversation, and then I'm the one who's like more short and like to the point with things. So it's just sometimes we can't even go based off of like the messages before you actually like see each other one on one. So it's you can also that's also a filter that you have on the dating app too. It's like, oh, I'm better via text, I'm better in person, and all that. So it's kind of interesting to see that as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's like a setting that you can put on your Tinder is whether you are like a big time texter or better in person or, you know, introverted all around. Don't like
Yeah.
either one. But, you know, either way, it's important to figure out whether you have that connection with them,
Right.
which you can't know until you're talking to them face to face or on a video call like this. So we just have to keep putting ourselves out there. But yeah, I think this was a really good overview of what mental health can be like when we're on these dating apps and how we think about these apps in general. So I am going to give you guys a quick chance to plug anything that you may be working on, anything that you would want our listeners to check out. And then we will end this episode. But if you would like to hear more tips for how you can take care of yourselves on the dating apps and some connections on how we think about mental health and dating apps, diving deeper into the topic, then you should head over to our Patreon and check out our Save a Seat program on Patreon. So I will turn it over to Marie if you have any websites, Instagrams, LinkedIn's you want to plug.
Not working on anything, but yeah, if you want to follow me personally on Instagram, it's Marie Fisher, 2 E's at Marie, 2 R's in Fisher.
Perfect. Thank you. How about you, Vikki? Anything that you want the listeners to check out?
Yeah, I think you can just follow my therapy practice. It's just Rooted Therapy and Wellness on Instagram.
Awesome. So check those out and definitely head on over to our Patreon to hear a deeper dive into the topic. But as always, thank you for listening and let's talk more on Monday. Thanks, ladies.